If we can just be present in the moment that we're in with our kids, like we can have all the wisdom in the world coming at us, and we can have all the knowledge and read all the parenting books. But like, if we don't have that piece with presence, like that's where the translation can come through, right? And that's where we can use our own intuition, our own spirituality, our own knowledge, and synergize all of those things. Like, it's in the present that we do that. And so if we can practice presence and just being in this moment with our kids, no matter how uncomfortable it is, right? No matter how joyful it is, just all of those things, we will have what we need. And so I would say, like, your presence practice, as simple, it sounds so simple, right? And so elementary, but just like I started a mindfulness practice. It's been, I think my daughter was 3 or 4 when I started my practice. And I was like like doing my meditation.
Hi, Conscious Parents. It's Carrie here, and I am here with a little info about raising our mindful kids. I've got some tips and tricks about breaking free of the box and becoming who you are and teaching your kids how to do that along the way. Join us. Hi there and welcome back. It's Carrie, your friendly intuitive mama here, and I'm so excited. I have a wonderful guest today. She's somebody who also has a podcast going and a very similar aligned mission. I have Lindsay Miller here, who is a mindfulness kids coach, and she hosts the Stress Nanny podcast. I'm so excited, Lindsay. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Carrie, thanks so much for having me. I can't wait for our conversation.
Yeah, so it was so cool to run into somebody who's also so dedicated to helping kids on this mindful journey, helping parents on this mindful journey. I wanted to jump right in and ask you, what are some of your favorite mindful practices that you like to share with other parents to help kids? So mindful tools for kiddos.
So, and I love that you brought parents and kids kind of into the same space with both your show, and your work, because I think that that's such a key element to teaching kids mindfulness at home, is the recognition that often as parents, we're learning alongside our kiddos, right? So if we can take our mindfulness practice down to like the basics, it really supports our own growth as well, right? So making it accessible for kids, even as young as 3 or 4. I know your kids are 6 and 9, right? So having a mindfulness practice that's accessible to any range, it really creates like such a beautiful space, because mindfulness is so simple that it can apply and support folks of any age. So us learning it on the level with our kids is such a beautiful way to get into the basics of a practice. So I'm really glad you asked. One of the things that I like to think of right off the bat is a tool by Becky Kennedy. And one of the things she talks about is like benches, the idea of each emotion being a bench. So if you imagine this beautiful park, like think of Central Park or any park that you've been to, just like a big, wide, vast area with all these different, sections to it, different things to see. And it's like, it's got benches everywhere, right? So like a bench over here under this tree, a bench over by the pond, a bench over by like the playground. And each bench represents an emotion. And like throughout our lives, our job is to learn to sit on all the benches. So we need to be able to sit with each emotion, right? Like in a different space in our life, in different experiences. And so when we look at the idea of benches as emotions, it's not as scary, right? We're like, oh, that little part, like that dark corner of the park over there, that seems a little creepy, where we might feel a little fear on that bench, right? It's just a part of the park. And so if we can learn to walk to that part of the park and be okay sitting there, then we learn to sit on that bench. And it's not as scary anymore, because we're like, oh, we've been on that bench. Like, it's okay. There's some actually really interesting stuff over there, right? Mm-hmm. And as parents, our role is to be able to sit on the bench with our kids, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it can be so tricky, because when we're looking at the situation that they're in, we might want to be like, let's go to this bench over here. Like, this bench seems like a much easier or more fun or, just more comfortable space for all of us. Like, let's not go over there in the bench in like the shady part of the, the park. And I think that learning to sit on all the benches with our kids is such a beautiful metaphor for mindfulness, because as you know, throughout our parenting journey, we're going to find ourselves in a variety of situations. And some of them are ones we anticipate, and some of them are ones that really are invitations to something we never would have chosen on our own. right? And so when our kid starts darting off into this part of the park where we're like, I don't even know what to do here. I've never been here before. This is scary to me and uncertain. Our inclination is going to be to pull them to one of the benches that we're okay with. But I find that in my own parenting journey and like in experiences with kids who are highly sensitive, they're taking us to all kinds of benches that we've never even dreamed of, right? And when we can learn how to trust, like, and just be able to sit with them on that bench, and our job isn't only to be able to sit with them while they figure out what it's like to be in that bench, then like it opens up so many different opportunities for us to just be a little more patient with ourselves, to acknowledge and accept with presence where our kids are at. So that would be the first one.
Along with that, I guess before we go on to other ones, I feel like that opens the door for the self-awareness or the self-acceptance, right? Because if you're
100%.
able to be on that bench, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think, at least for me, growing up, a lot of those benches were like taboo. A little bit like, and my parents are great and they did the best that they could. And they did, the best with what they had at the time. But like in a society with an emerging sense of emotional intelligence, we're just invited to understand emotions a little differently, right? And so when I was little, like going onto the benches where it was sad or you were mad, or, maybe you were like stewing in some grief for a while. Those were benches that were kind of like, stop, maybe we don't want our kids to go there, right? Like that wasn't a bench that I was maybe taught to sit in comfortably. And so now as an adult, like I'm learning to go to those benches. Life is inviting me in a variety of situations to go to those benches and really get okay with sitting there. And it's entailed, like what you just said, sitting with like this kind of disconnect and a little bit of dissonance between like this bench being wrong, this bench being bad, this bench being like off limits or, like something inherently not okay about it. To me, just having like a sense of like, this is a bench in the park. All the benches are equally, like it's just life, right? The emotions are just a part of life. And so when we can acknowledge and recognize our own humanity in those moments, by just accepting like the fact that like me being on the loss, sad, grief bench for a while doesn't mean something's wrong with me. It doesn't mean something hasn't, like I've made a choice that somehow, like made it so that I had to sit here, or it like there's not a part of judgment, like about sitting in that bench anymore where I had to work through that, for quite a while. Be like, if I'm on this bench, that means I did something wrong. When it just actually means that I'm human.
I was thinking there's a lot of people that have mentioned when their kiddos are going through different phases. Maybe 3, I feel like, was kind of a bubble of hypersensitivity in our house. Age 6 was kind of, 6.5 was kind of a bubble of it again. And our kiddos can become very hypersensitive. Do you have any ideas about trying to keep our kids in the positive version of the self-awareness if they're having meltdowns a lot or these type of, or sometimes it's anger and they react towards you in a way and then later on they're saying, I'm a bad kid. Like, what are your thoughts on those pieces? Ever feel like you're doing all the things, gentle parenting, routines, therapy, but something's still missing? What if the missing piece is spirituality? Take our free quiz right now. What kind of woo are you as a parent? It's fun, quick, and reveals your unique spiritual style, so you can parent with more flow, trust, and alignment. Because we parents don't need more shoulds in our lives. Let's lean into our strengths. Click the link in the show notes below. Happy days, spiritual parents.
Yeah, such, again, great awareness, right? About the seasons in life where like sometimes we just find ourselves in these moments where it just feels like everything all at once and it's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think was key for me, like in my own parenting journey, and then also just as an individual wandering around in this world, was the recognition that in moments when we're feeling something strong or when our kiddo is feeling something strong and we're either kind of attuned to it really deeply or we're just trying to figure out how to work with it, is like understanding that like we can feel the thing and then choose how we move through it. And I think for kids, for adults, I think that's a novel concept. But for kids, as they're learning to like feel all these big things, right? Especially kids who tend toward more sensitivity, right? Like as they're feeling so much, being able to like feel that and then move through is kind of like the practice that we work on with the kids that I work with. So I have here like a beach ball. So one of the activities I do with the kids is like a emotion beach ball. And so we talk about like in moments when we're feeling a lot of things, it's kind of like we're filling our beach ball, right? And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in those episodes where that emotion just kind of like pops out of the water, it's because like over time, if any of us try to hold a beach ball underwater for long enough, right, it's going to pop up somewhere. And a lot of times it's where we don't expect it or don't want it to be or don't, all of those things.
Those moments, yep.
And so with kids, like we just normalize, for me at least, what I do a lot with kids is I normalize and I say like, hey, any human, right? Like you're sitting in a pool, imagine that feeling, right? Like of trying to hold that beach ball underwater. Somebody comes along and bumps you, somebody jumps in and the water shifts, like any small change in the circumstance can create a scenario where that beach ball just flies out of the water, usually like whacks us in the face on the way up, right? And like hits somebody else and they get mad. So I think of those moments in that way where we have like if we're holding those big emotions down and just trying to like keep them contained all the time, there are going to be moments when they pop up. But if we can learn to work with the emotion as it arises and as it comes up and move through it, that's when we can be letting air out of our beach ball and making it a little bit easier to manage. So first, normalizing for me is always the big one, because I never want kids to feel like feeling something is bad or feeling something is going to be like getting in their way. Like we talk about it more like a tendency. So your tendency is to feel things deeply. My tendency is to feel things deeply. Our tendency here is to feel things deeply. And so if that's the tendency, then we just need some tools to figure out how to work with that tendency. Like if that's how our brain works, that's how this beautiful body that we have works. That's how our spirit is kind of taking in the world. Those are all like inherent to our journey through life, right? And so for a kid, I don't want them to turn that off. Yeah. Right? Because that's going to be the way that they interpret and move through the world and find the things that are resonant for them. But as a mom, it's super challenging, right? To be in those moments and to be like, wow, that was a lot all at once. And like your sensitivity to all the things is, like it's something we need to work with and manage. So the beach ball, one of the ways we let air out of the beach ball, we like breathe. Right, obviously. So I have a lot of different breathing exercises, whether it's like heart belly breath, where we have one hand up here, one hand on our belly, and we're breathing. We'll do box breath. We'll just do like a 4-count inhale and an 8-count exhale to try to like steady the nervous system so we can process. And then naming the emotion. I love Lindsay Brayman's work. She has like an emotion sensation wheel that she uses, and I have used that with my clients, and she just developed one for kids, and so it has emojis as part of it, so you can look at it like you can, it has words but also emojis. So in those moments where the emotion is so big that we're feeling a disconnect from our logical brain, we can use the emojis to just be like, it's this, so naming it first, normalizing it, then naming it. And then having the awareness around like, for my specific mind, my specific body, what are the tools that support me when I'm feeling something that's really big? And it's not about like when I say move through it, we don't always have control over how fast that process is, right? Like there are some instances where we can be a little more intentional and some where we ride it out, right? But I think in the moments when we are like needing to take extra good care of ourselves because we're feeling something deeply, those are the things we teach our kids, right? Like, what are the things you need when you're feeling something really deep? Do you need like that, soft blanket of yours? Do you, like, what are some of the things for your kids that they use when they're feeling something deep?
Yeah, I tried weighted blankets. That was not one, but we have
For
like
them,
cozy corners. We have bean bags and cozy blankets, lava lamps, swings, trampolines. We have lots of movement or cozy. I really try to follow what they're in that mood for.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think like one of the things that At least for me, when my daughter was younger, when I felt like this, like that she just had a different orientation to the world than I did. And there were things she took in at a level that was different than what I was accustomed to. I remember thinking like, feeling like I needed to, and I think you've made it through this much quicker than I did, but like make it a little bit more like mainstream for her, like help her acclimate to the things other people did, or help her figure out how to be okay in this situation. And then I got to the point where I realized like, actually, she's not okay in this situation. So I'm going to change the situation,
Yeah.
And so I think that like honoring and working with those tendencies, I remember when she was young feeling like I might be doing her a disservice because like she had to live in the real world and I didn't know what that would look like, like kind of helping her with this awareness at a young age. And I've just recently been thinking about how grateful I am to myself and my support circle for supporting my efforts to like help her know herself. She's 15, she's almost 16. And so seeing what that looks like, like 10 years down the road, like there's so many things I would have said to myself back then about like, how this is going to turn out. Like it feels so scary right now because this is a different way of parenting than maybe you've seen, or different than what other people are doing, or it feels like, is this really going to serve in the long run, But it's been so beautiful to me to kind of look back and see those tiny spaces where we practice the self-acceptance, right? And we practice like, these are your tendencies, let's figure out how to work with them. And we kind of just tuned in with a lot of self-awareness, as highly sensitive kids have, to like, what is going on right now and what do you need in this moment? And like, the cumulative effect of that over the years has just, it's left me in awe of like the person that she's becoming.
That's so beautiful. Okay, so then what would you tell us if we're like the next era back, right? With the younger generation right now, what would you tell parents?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most challenging things, and I know we were going to get to this, but I think one of the most challenging things about parenting in modern life is just like this complete inundation of information, right? Like there are so many ways to be a great parent right now, right? Whereas like, I there just wasn't, they're just, and I'm only like, I'm 44, right? And so I think even back when my daughter was little, we were just talking the other day and I was like, I think I got my first iPhone when she was like 18 months or, it was around the age of 2. And so if we think about that trajectory and just like the information I had access to when she was little, it was much different than, what parents of young kids have access to now. Even just those couple of years made a huge difference, right?
That's true.
And
it's
so
true.
So I think that, So I think that like having the information on how to do something can sometimes be super overwhelming because you have this expert telling you this and this expert telling you this and this expert telling you this, or like you're trying to remember like, what was that thing I was supposed to do, or how was I supposed to be in this moment, or like, what was that phrase? It can be so overwhelming, right? To look at all of the input on how to do it correctly or how to do it the right way. And then to feel like you need to translate it immediately into the moment that you're in. And so it's one of the reasons I love mindfulness and why I'm passionate about sharing it with families is because like, we're not going to go wrong with presence, right? Like if we can just be present in the moment that we're in with our kids, like we can have all the wisdom in the world coming at us, and we can have all the knowledge and read all the parenting books. But like, if we don't have that piece with presence, like that's where the translation can come through, right? And that's where we can use our own intuition, our own spirituality, our own knowledge, and synergize all of those things. Like it's in the present that we do that. And so if we can practice presence and just being in this moment with our kids, no matter how uncomfortable it is, right? No matter how joyful it is, just all of those things, we will have what we need. And so I would say like your presence practice, as simple, it sounds so simple, right? And so elementary, but just like I started a mindfulness practice. It's been, I think my daughter was 3 or 4 when I started my practice. And I was like like doing my meditation. I would just sit next to my bed before I went to bed, before I said my prayers. I would sit for 2 minutes and I would just like breathe for 2 minutes. And that was it. I didn't have a lot of energy because I was chasing like a toddler around, right? Like a preschooler. Like I didn't have, yeah, exactly. But that was my practice, right? So 2 minutes before bed at night and 2 minutes after I woke up in the morning, if I wasn't like chasing someone already at that time. And those 2 minutes, like morning and night, have made like a world of difference in the way that like I have been able to parent, in the way our life is. And it's, again, it's not to say we've had some really, really rough moments, right? But being able to be present in the rough moments is what has allowed my own intuition, my own like wisdom, also like the wisdom of the universe to find me when it needed me, and the education that I've garnered to be in that moment with me. But if I'm fighting the moment and not wanting to be in it and just thinking I'm a failure and going to mess it up, those things all keep me from presence, right? I'm fighting what is. So as hard as some of those moments are, and I hear, like, I mean, I've been in some gut-wrenching moments, right? And it's rough to sit on that bench in those moments. And also, it's the place where the magic happens.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you say presence. Oh, that sounds so simple. But also, I feel like parents need a little bit of simple sometimes because it's so hard. You're on Instagram and you're seeing the 85 different things that you're supposed to do as a parent, and then you start to compare yourself like, I reacted the wrong way. Oh, great. I ruined them for life. No, it's just, there's just so much pressure that we put on ourselves now. Because I was 10 years later with my kids, even though we're the same age, grad school for life. But I feel like there was so much parenting advice out there and online so much that, it's just this bubble of anxiety that can come up for parents.
One of the things that I really needed around that time, and my sister shared this tool with me that she had learned in grad school, because I was really hard on myself. Like it took me a long time to get my daughter here. And then once she was here, I really wanted to parent her great, right? Like I wanted to be a model mother, exactly. Perfect. Not necessarily, I just like had spent so much time and energy hoping for her that I wanted to do right by her. Do you know what I mean? And so my understanding of what do right by her means has changed a lot in, the 15 years, almost 16 I've been parenting her. And again, I think it comes back to like, instead of me having all the answers and knowing exactly what to do in every situation, my understanding of do right by her became like, be present with her in the moment that we're in and respond with compassion and acceptance to whatever we're facing together in that moment. Right. And that's a totally different practice than me having this roadmap of like how life is going to go, how I'm going to do things, what what an expert said I should do. But me understanding her. But one of the roadblocks for me of doing that was my own criticism of myself, right? So in that moment, I'd be like, if I did something that I wasn't comfortable with, or I had, maybe I had spoken to her in a way that I realized like, that probably wasn't ideal, or that was mean, or, I wasn't as patient in that moment as I should have been. In those moments, I had to sit with my discomfort, my disappointment, my, shame, whatever the feeling was. And I had to just sit with it and process that simultaneously being present with her. Right. And so that's the shift that I had to make. And one of the tools that really helped me was this tool my sister shared, which is a thought river. And the idea is that we all have like this river of thoughts flowing through our heads. And at any moment, we like often find ourselves drowning in the river, right? Like we are the thought and we're getting like battered by whatever's coming down the river. And we have the choice to like stand up. It's not a very deep river. Stand up and walk to the side and sit on a rock and just watch those thoughts float by and choose the ones, right, that are going to serve us. Let the rest go. So I had to become a real expert at letting all the self-deprecating thoughts go down the river, because they weren't serving me. They weren't serving my daughter in that moment. And it only took a small amount of like regret about how like the tone I used or, something like that for me to acknowledge like, I need a reset right now. Or, I need to be a little bit, I need to do a redo with her. So we would do a redo and I'd be like, can I have a redo for that? And then, we'd go back and kind of replay the moment. But in those moments, I had to be letting like all of that self-talk that was negative and that was mean to myself be floating away, and let that not be the thing I pulled out of the river, right? Like when my sister first explained the tool to me, her teacher had said like, a lot of times we're pulling the dead pig out of the river and carrying it around with us all day long.
Well,
which is the stark image, but it really does speak to the kind of things that we often stew on, right? And if we can learn to recognize those thoughts that we have about ourselves that are really like off-putting or really mean and not and judgmental about ourselves, we recognize those, we can start to be like, oh, there's that one again, letting it go. Oh, there's that one again, letting it go. Before in the river getting whacked by that thought over and over again, and we don't realize we have some like a measure of control over which thoughts we choose to believe and act on, that's when we're stuck, right?
yeah. Yeah. It's, it's so interesting because as we've been talking about, parenting today can feel almost like so much pressure, but also speaking a different language for ourselves than what we received as children. And that can put more pressure on trying to accept ourselves for who we are. All of these pieces come in and they kind of mold together, put us in the thought river. I love the thought river. That's beautiful. So I was thinking with the self-acceptance, modeling that for our kids as parents, and also trying to use this new language that parenting can feel like, since we're parented so different, or we're parenting different than we were parented. Oftentimes, along with that journey is so much healing as a parent too, looking at pieces of why we're not accepting ourselves. Why does it feel like we're speaking a foreign language, and why is that so challenging for us too? So that was kind of where I was thinking of.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a great point, because in those moments, again, this is like us being able to kind of quickly determine or quickly, and it's not quick at first, right? But like us being able to discern how we're feeling, a lot of that comes with the self-acceptance, right? Like if we're afraid of the bench of shame, or we're afraid of the bench of doing it differently than our parents did, and that like uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, we all have had a range of experiences being parented. And sometimes it like we may be like, well, the model they used worked great for me and I'm great, right? Like things have turned out. And also I maybe want something different. Or we may be working from a range where we're like, there were quite a few things that did not work for me, right? Or that were really off-putting or really hard for me as a kid. Those things I want to change, right? So there's going to be a spectrum for all of us. But I think the key in those moments is to recognize, like, whatever's coming up for you, that's the self-acceptance you're practicing in that moment, right? Like that's the piece, you're just letting that be there. And you're like, yes, you're not holding it under in your emotion, like beach ball. You're just letting it come up and you're feeling it. And it's sometimes challenging, and sometimes you're maybe needing to journal a little bit later because you have a little person in front of you that you're also trying to interact with. And so you're like, okay, shame, I see you there. I'm going to address you in a second. Right now, I'm going to try to have compassion in this moment for both of us, right? Like for me and for the little face sitting in front of me. But I think, it's such a good point that we can be feeling all of the things and simultaneously trying to model a skill that we are like kind of just grasping at in terms of self-acceptance.
Yes, that's so beautiful. It's so well said. Thank you, Lindsay. And I think I sidetracked a little bit, but I loved what you were sharing at the beginning about some of the mindful pieces. What's another favorite mindful practice of yours for kids?
Yeah, so I definitely use the thought river like that I just described, and kids can use that too, right?
Yeah.
When I'll have them draw. So the kids that I coach, I meet with some kids like one-on-one every week, and we kind of practice the tools, and then I send the parents an email and we update them on what we learned and how they can practice together at home. So one of the ways I teach the thought river is they all have a mindfulness journal, and we'll do like a little collage. So I send like fabric. It's like for some of it's the dirt on the side of the river and some of it's the river. So you can do this at home, right? Make yourself a thought river artwork with your kiddo, especially like if the sensory is off-putting, you don't have to use that. But if the sensory is actually supportive, that can be a way to connect. We'll make the rock on the side of the river. And then I use these small Post-its, and we'll just talk about some of the thoughts that the kiddo has in their river. And a lot of times it's just like parents, right? It's I'm doing this wrong. I'm awful. I'll never figure this out. I don't know why I even try. Those are a lot of the things that are in their river too. And again, as a parent, when you're having that conversation as a parent, that's hard to hear, right? Like you're listening to what your kid's thinking about themselves, and you're like, and your initial reaction is like, what have I done wrong? Or like, I'm such a, you know what I mean? It's just natural. But we'll take it upon ourselves to own their river. And really, again, in that moment, it's the self-compassion for ourselves and our kids to be like, hey, whatever's in your river, we can work with it. Right. And that's the self-acceptance. We're like, we can work with any tendency, any thought, any emotion. Like we have the resilience in our house to work with that. And so that's where we can start to like, okay, what are some other thoughts in your river? And usually the most prominent ones are like the dead pig thoughts that are the things that are holding you back or just awful, you know?
Yeah.
And those are the things that stick out to us the most. But when we look at it, we're also like, you know, our kids might say I wish I was better friends with Amy, or I think it would be fun to learn to dance, or, you know, like I'm curious about dinosaurs, or, you know, I'm wondering what I'm going to play in my basketball game this week, you know, like what position or how I'm going to. And so when we can, again, a lot of times it is just those few moments of sitting with the discomfort of what's coming up for them initially that get us, you know, bridge us to the other things we could focus on. But if we don't have kind of the ability to sit on that bench yet, that's okay too. We can say something like, can we, you know what, I need a minute. Can we revisit this? I really want to hear what you're saying. Can we come back to this later tonight? You know, so we can give ourselves a break then too. But if we can sit with it, we can also just recognize that like, if we can move through that little bit of discomfort, we find like an amazing array of other thoughts that are in their river. And those are the ones we're like, okay, like noticing all those things, what are some of the ones you want to take out? Like, what are some of the thoughts you want to carry around with you? And those are the things that are going to be like, I think I could figure it out. I've done this before. Like, I think if I try, I can do it. Or if I ask for help, there's a way. You know, those thoughts are all there too. They just don't get our big, you know, most of our attention. And so when we can sit with the discomfort of hearing the thoughts that are really holding them back, help them practice. And it's a practice, right? Like in our house, we are still letting thoughts go down our thought river in, you know, a lot of situations. But like that's the reason we have them in our house for so long, right? Is one of the reasons is to give them the opportunity to work through some of that stuff while they're under our roof, and we can just love them so deeply while they're doing it. And then from there, they can take the practice on their own, right? So there's nothing wrong with you if your kids are having those thoughts. That's actually like a moment where like having a parent is such a gift.
So beautifully said. I love that. Yeah. Everybody experiences life in a different way. So yeah, you never know what's going to come out of their river.
Yeah, for sure.
That. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was a wonderful conversation. I think our listeners will be so excited to have so many tools and practices to put in our pocket, and also just a little self-love for parents, this magical world we're raising our kids in today.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been so good to talk to you. And again, I just have so much respect for the work you're doing in the world. So thank you for the ways that you're making changes like ripple out from your podcast.
Yes, I love talking and connecting with other change makers out there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in, Changemakers. This is Carrie. And if you haven't done a review for us, 5 stars and a little few words about what you've enjoyed in our podcast episodes, we would really appreciate it. If you guys would like to ever message me, I would love any questions you have or any feedback at info@hearttoheartlife.com. We also have a brand new website, which we're super excited to share. It's hearttoheartlife.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and happy life, happy times, Changemaker families. Bye. Please remember that the information shared on this podcast is educational in nature and does not constitute licensed mental health advice. If you need such advice, you should speak with a licensed professional about your unique situation. Thanks so much, happy listeners.